What's the difference between a bourbon and a rye?
It's a different podcast. It's whiskey one. Is
that next door?
Yeah, exactly.
It's coming next week.
I think you're in the wrong class.
Okay, I'll be right back. Sorry.
Freshman.
Undebeatable. We are undefeatable. We are undebeatable. We are undebeatable.
Now he puts the ball on the floor, driving on James. He and he threw it down. That looked like Thor coming right down the middle of the lane with a thunder hammer.
Welcome, Pacer fans. You're listening to the Undebeatables, your weekly Pacer podcast. And this is Pacers 101. We're coming to you from Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm your host, Joey Gaffrida, the man behind the dials and season ticket holder. Joining me as always are three weekly analysts, coast to coast like buttered toast. From the nation's capital in Indy, it's the doctor, Jason Triplett.
How's it going, Pacer Nation? It is day 2 of Undebeatacon. We're all still alive, and I am happy to report that. Things could have gone very badly.
Shocking result in that one.
From Breckenridge, Colorado, visiting Indianapolis, he's our in-house bartender, mixing up the drinks and the crappy jingles. It's John Colson.
We are a little worse for the wear, but we are still alive. I'm excited about this one. Little special pod for everybody coming out of Undebeatacon.
And from out west, Seattle, Washington, it's our enforcer, John Harper.
Is it possible to be drunk and hungover at the same time?
You tell us.
Seems to be the case. There's not enough hair on that dog.
That's what she said? No?
I don't think it works.
Okay, I don't think that works.
And again,
a few times.
as with our last show, we've got a special guest, best friend of the show, Greg Clark.
What up? I just have to say that we're also not in jail, and that is also a plus.
Yeah.
And again, a shocking result.
So,
Smart play.
So yeah, this is a little bit of a different show. It's not the normal show that we have. This one's called Pacers 101, and we want to sort of get back to the basics of, I guess, of just basketball as a game.
So we're going to explain all the bullshit we always talk about?
Yeah, all the stuff that I don't even know what you guys are saying. I just smile and nod and carry on.
We're just making this up as we go along.
The fans have been clamoring for a...
Yeah, so I think we've, over the time we've done this show, we've sort of figured out there's a lot of terms and concepts that maybe not are clear to everybody. So we wanted to try to just get back to basics.
This is one of those pods that you can put in your back pocket. If we come up with a term, later in the season you're not sure about, you just go back and refer to this pod. It's one you keep on the top of your iTunes.
Joe, you're the IT guy. How do you put a pod in your pocket?
I don't know. I think I think this one we may we'll have some stuff on the website, which would be easy reference. John's going to write extensive instructions.
Bookmark it.
Yeah, we'll try. Also, I think that throughout the pod there will be things that we try to explain visually, and we'll try to put some diagrams up on the pod too, or at least point to other.
Right.
There's some really good websites out there that sort of show diagrams of plays and things like that. So
yeah. So I think before we can get started with that, we've changed up the drinks from last night. What did you get? The
Pendleton's, little Pendleton 1910.
And I've got we got an Amstel Light back.
Yes,
which
we have it back.
I'll be happy to pair that with.
it pairs nicely, I think.
Yeah.
And some Jameson in reserve as well.
Yeah, exactly. You can go for a traditional Irish whiskey.
That's how that's said in Ireland.
Yeah.
Irish.
Drink it.
As I'm looking around, I see Colson. I've never seen you without a High Life, so that's on the table.
Yeah. But I do have the Amstel Light back.
And an Amstel Light.
I'm still laid back.
And some Bell's Oberon, which I know Harper's been looking to get at since he can't get it out west.
Fiendin'.
So let's start with the very basics. You've got the court that the players play on, made from wood.
That's right.
It's called a field, right?
It is, that's right. So court dimensions, 94 feet by 50 feet wide. The out of bounds under the basket is referred to as the baseline. I think we talk about baseline jumpers quite a bit. And 15 feet from the backboard is the free throw line, also known as the charity stripe. Within that, or part of that, is a 19 foot by 12 foot area, plus a half circle that's considered the lane and the key.
But the entire area is called the paint.
The paint, right? Okay, playing in the paint.
Playing in the paint. That's where your bigs live and die, right?
And we get a stat of points in the paint. That would be scoring from that area.
Right.
It's also called the lane. And sometimes
Right.
we
Sure, the
refer to it
lane.
as the lane.
Yeah, we do refer to it as the key as well. You had a fun fact on that.
Yeah. So if you're looking at a basketball court, typically the free throw line is parallel with the baseline, and then there's two lines that drop down that make a rectangle, right? That is the paint or the lane. And it used to be that those two parallel lines were actually shorter.
They were
or
closer together.
Closer
right?
together,
Yeah.
right? So that the free throw line was wider
Right.
than the actual.
But you still had that same semicircle on top, which made it look like
Like a
Yeah,
key.
looked like a key.
yeah.
There is 4 feet out from the baseline, underneath the basket, a half circle, a semicircle, designates the restricted area. We'll talk more about that later, but that's important for charges versus blocks. Also, off of the free throw line is known as the elbow. You'll actually see a line. That line extends on a lot of courts. It does create an elbow from the lane.
No, not
Or
a single arena in the league.
You sure?
I mean, there's like a corner.
There's a corner. That's what I'm talking about.
Right.
Corner.
But
Which-
it's sort of imaginary.
It's the
you draw that
imaginary
line all the way
extended
yeah,
line.
You extend
If you're
the line.
along the free throw line, that is the elbow.
Right. So that's where you'd find your elbow jumper.
Elbow
if you were
jumpers.
taking it, yeah.
Right. And then there's a 3-point line that is 22 feet at the sidelines, and it arcs all the way to 23 feet and 9 inches. That's important. I think when we talk about long twos, we say it's a 20-footer or 18-footer, considered a long two versus a 24-footer, which is a 3-pointer.
And so this is also important to note that a 3-point shot is worth more points than a 2-point shot.
Whoa.
Slow down.
And
slow down.
That's
Turbo.
going to come into hand when we talk about offensive efficiency and things like that.
Right.
You do score more points from shooting behind that arc.
Right.
There's also an area, so when you think about the sidelines and the 22-foot arc, there's only a 3-foot area between the 3-point line and the sideline. And if you shoot from that area, that's considered a corner three, which is one of the highest percentage shots versus...
In terms of efficiency.
Yes, because you get more points and it's the closest three you can get.
Right. Obviously, closer is better. And the reason they can't extend the 3-point line any further is because you just run out of court.
Right. And,
Right.
and basketball players have huge feet and can barely fit in there anyway.
And it's probably worth noting that the 3-point line distance has changed several times.
When did they introduce it?
It was originally introduced in the 70s, right?
Well, so it came from the ABA.
Right.
So when the ABA and the NBA merged, they took the 3-point line from that. So when you talk about NBA stats before 1976, they are without the 3-point arc.
Right. So the only 3-point play at that time, which you'll sometimes hear to refer to as the traditional 3-point play, which is you go for alley-oop, you get fouled, and you go to line for one more.
Right. 2+1.
2+1.
Right. But that's the end of the ratios. You don't really need to have written these down and know exactly.
I mean, if you did, that's cool. We're excited that you're this into it, but we will also post a court dimension thing or a link to a court dimension.
IR squared.
Yeah.
So I think the next topic is the players and their positions.
Before we do that, can just real quickly, this is maybe Basketball 99 and not 101, but the game is 48 minutes long, comprised of 4 quarters of 12 minutes each, right?
That is correct.
Okay. How many timeouts does each team get? 7?
I think it's 6.
A full timeout is essentially 60 seconds.
Yeah.
And there's TV timeouts, which also comes into play. But, as a coach, you get 6 timeouts.
And so if you're a busy person and you're watching NBA games and you want to time when you actually deal with your children versus when you watch the game, there's
And you don't have a DVR?
Yeah, exactly. You don't have a DVR. The TV timeouts, as we talked about, it'll be the first stoppage after the 6-minute mark in the first quarter, and then after the 9-minute mark and 3-minute marks of the second quarter.
Yeah.
Well, sorry. First and third, after the 6-minute mark, and then second and fourth after the 3 and 9-minute mark.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you're timing when to run and get that laundry,
Or beer.
If you want to get us beer, you got to train the little kid to go get the beer, or the dog.
Or the dog, yeah.
Already done.
Gatto.
Oh, so players and positions.
Players in position.
That's what I'm just reading off the page.
So there are 15 players on each team.
So you got 15 roster spots, 13 active players.
Right. So there's a minimum. There's also a minimum of 13 players on a team. You have to have at least 13 players
On a
outside
team
of-
at any given time. However, that means, in injury situations, you can dress a lot less than that. You don't have to dress 13, but that's what you have to have in order to have basically a quorum, right?
a basketball team.
Quorum.
So you could have a 13-player roster and not fill it up.
Are we not doing Latin this week? What happened?
different class. Latin 101 down the hall.
That's on the right-hand side.
Sorry, boys.
Across the hall from Whiskey One.
I'll hit classics on the way out.
So there are 2 inactive spots. Those 2 players, if you do have a full 15-man roster, 2 players are not allowed to dress and not allowed to play.
So they stand on the sideline naked.
And get pelted with tomatoes.
Do a little dance every time somebody scores.
Now, you also there is a practice squad in football, but not in the NBA?
Right, correct.
So the 15 that you have, that's what you got.
That's what you got. Yeah.
Well, there's also the D League, but that's
Right. You could, the D League is you send guys down there.
Right. It's the minors of basketball.
Right. And you can send them back, but you can't have like 6 D League guys. Technically, all of those guys can be on your team if you have a roster spot to fill.
Right. So you can trade one of your active 15 for one
Or
of
just
those
cut a
different
guy, or
guys.
if somebody gets injured, season-ending injury, you can bring up a guy from the D League.
That's wrong. Sorry.
you right.
It's some kind of...
So there are 5 players on the court at all time for each team, and there are 5 traditional positions. Those are the point guard, the shooting guard, the small forward, the power forward, and the center. Each position tends to, but is not limited to, size and skill set. So, in general, your smallest player is your point guard, and your tallest player is your center. But that's not necessarily true. It just tends towards those things.
There's no
I'm
rules.
gonna interject a fun fact. So we would traditionally talk about. So there's the 5 positions that you just outlined, and they can be broken down into the front court,
Yes.
which are the forwards and center, and the back court, which are the 2 guard positions. And the reason they're called the back court actually is in the original version of basketball, the back court players could not cross half court.
Because they'd be too close to the apple bucket.
Yeah, exactly.
They would hit their head.
Peaches? Yeah. But yeah, so the front court guy basically played 3-on-5 on offense, right? Because the back court guys could not come across them.
Yeah, that was some exciting watching.
It was. There was also no shot clock then, so there's just a lot of dribbling around.
Thankfully, rules have been changed.
Yeah.
Well, and another fun fact is my mother actually played that way
Is that right?
when
Okay,
she
yeah.
was in high school
Yeah.
in Iowa. They were, I think, the last state to switch over to the modern style. But
Well, little known fact, Iowa actually is still in the 1850s.
It's time travel. You go across the state line. It's weird.
I'm going there. This will be fun to look forward to.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are heading that way. Check out a basketball game right there.
Also, we just talked about the front court as small forward, power forward, and center. But oftentimes people refer to the front court as just the power forward and the center as well.
Well, because of the way that the game has evolved.
And that's Yeah, but
You
it's
do
worth noting. Yeah,
3 guard lineups.
right.
That sort
They'll
of
talk
thing.
about the back court is 2 guys, the front court is 2 guys, and then you just got apparently an X factor.
Yeah.
So we do often refer to players or positions as numbers, which gets confusing, but it's very simple. The point guard is 1, the shooting guard is 2, the small forward is 3, the power forward is 4, and the center is 5.
Point guards tend to be smallest, centers tend to be the largest, so it basically goes in order of height.
And also, there is some sense of I always like to think about the floor and then the positions. The numbers get higher the closer they get to the basket. So,
Right.
so point guard would be furthest away. They're the 1. The center's closest to the basket. That's 5.
Sure.
So, just a way for me to visually think about it. So, what do the positions do? Right.
So we need to talk about responsibilities.
Sure. So the point guard traditionally handles the ball, brings it up the court, and is the coach on the floor.
He's your best ball handler. Ideally, he's a fairly good jump shooter. Or
But not necessary.
Or if not, at least can get into the lane.
Right.
And maybe create from there. But you want him to be a great passer and a great ball handler. And he really has to have a basketball IQ.
Has to set up the offense.
He's got to be the coach by proxy.
And one of the things I wanted to do to kind of help people with positions is to name famous point guards, because there are point guards that pretty much every average basketball fan or even person has heard of. Isaiah Thomas was a point guard. Big O, Indiana product.
Oscar
Robertson was a point guard, and Magic Johnson also played point guard positions.
And currently, you've got the likes of, if you go back far enough, Jason Kidd once played in the league.
Steve Nash.
Steve Nash, Chris Paul,
Rondo.
Kyrie Irving. Those are sort of your great ones.
George Hill.
Yeah.
Yeah, and George Hill. We'll get to that.
The greatest.
Right. We'll get to what positions the Pacers play here in a minute. The shooting guard is traditionally a shooter, shockingly enough. Tends to have the longest range.
Just
That's
think
not
Reggie
necessary.
Miller. Reggie
Yeah.
Miller is as pure a 2 as you can have, right?
The other famous 2 guards would be Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant.
Yeah. Tons of range. You want... they need to be able to handle the ball. You want them to be great passers, but a lot of what they do is create space for other people by
scoring.
a deep shot.
Right, by being, They stretch the floor. And when we
stretch
say
the floor.
stretch the floor, I mean it pulls the defense away
Right.
from the other players by having a long range
When
shot.
you make someone defend you away from the basket, it takes a warm body away so that, if you do decide to pass, that person can get in the lane with less traffic.
There's more room in the paint when you've got shooters.
Precisely.
And now that we've talked about paint, I feel like I can say that without
There you go.
everybody understanding. This is great.
It didn't stop you before.
Small forwards, traditionally the utility guy. You expect that player to do a little bit of everything. They can often shoot, but they can also post up, and they're also expected to rebound more than guards. Famous small forwards: Larry Bird,
Scottie Pippen,
LeBron James.
Baby Al.
Baby Al.
Yeah, I would say that the small forward is sort of the utility player of the basketball court.
I think that's really well put.
They can sort of do everything. That's the idea. They can play well outside. They typically can shoot, but they also are tall enough and strong enough to sort of
go down
battle
low.
on the inside.
Yeah.
Jack of all trades.
Right.
That's right.
They're sort of a midfielder
There was a time when
in football.
the 3 was very much a front court player, tended to play with their back to the basket.
Right.
And Larry Bird, in many ways, is credited with changing what that position means by being tall and a great ball handler and a great passer and a great rebounder.
And a great trash talker.
And the best.
And
trash talker.
having an awesome mullet and an awful, terrible stash.
Is there such thing as an unawesome mullet?
Did I just say an awful, terrible stash? I don't know.
It was that bad.
That's a technical term. But so I think, we can talk about the evolution of these positions, but the 3 is the one that has changed the most in terms of now you are expected to have, most of the time, a 3-point shot and be able to back a guy down and pound. Right.
I think the other position that's been revolutionized is the power forward position.
Sure.
So traditionally, this player plays close to the basket, is required to defend, block shots, rebound, and score on the low post. But that has changed with the idea of the stretch 4, where you get a guy that traditionally didn't even have to shoot outside of 10 feet, now shoots 3-pointers. You think of like a Dirk Nowitzki. That's why we talk about stretch fours. There's also the idea of the point forward. A guy like Antoine Walker or Chris Webber who takes a lot of point guard responsibilities from the 4 position with distributing the ball and setting up plays. So that position is equally evolved with the small forward position.
I agree, and the reason it's called a stretch 4 is pretty intuitive in that they do play with their back to the basket less and sort of post up, and they're shooting those threes, right? So again, they're stretching the floor. So you call them a stretch player.
Creating more space.
Creating space for other players.
And you, when we think about David West, power forward who plays a lot from the high post, can help facilitate the offense from further out on the court.
David West is not a stretch 4.
No, he's not a stretch forward. But what I'm saying is that pulls him away in a way that he's not necessarily all the way in the back.
I agree.
He's still
great.
spacing it.
He does a great job of spacing, but I think that the sort of current prototypical stretch 4 would be Josh Smith. He's a guy with a legitimate 3-point range who can also post shit up. And, he's a full-blown all-star. But.
And he's also a head case.
Yes.
Is that part of the...
if he got his head in if he thought the game more.
Yeah. You gotta think again.
Famous power forwards would be Tim Duncan,
Timmy.
Kevin Garnett, and Sir Charles Barkley, an analyst on TNT, and one-time aspiring politician.
Barkley also played some 3, though.
Yeah, well, Barkley was 6'6", but 6'5". He was really small for his position.
Right.
But,
I mean, it's worth noting that most power forwards are 6'10".
right. 6'10" would be 6'8", 6'9", 6'10", 6'11" would be your size.
But Charles had the butt the size of a 7
He
foot.
did. There's a reason they called him the round mound of rebound.
Round mound.
Jermaine O'Neal was...
Power forward.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah,
He was-
for Pacers fans, I would say
Yeah.
Jermaine O'Neal and the Davis brothers.
Those the Davis boys are very
power
that's
forwards.
think about
Well, I mean, those guys were both 4.5s. I think Jermaine O'Neal is a very sort of typical 4, right? So he's got a solid 20-foot in jumper, but also he can beat you in the lane with a dribble.
He's got low post moves.
He can he can hit shots close to the rim.
Solid cornrows.
Solid
That's
cornrows.
right.
Not anymore.
No.
Shout out to Tom Lewis from Indy Corners.
Yeah.
Big fan.
Yeah, big time.
That's right. So the center position traditionally plays closest to the basket. They are usually a key to the team's defensive scheme. Generally have some sort of low post game. Famous centers.
Can't think of any.
Yeah, centers have been traditionally the most dominant position in a lot of ways. And the theory used to be you couldn't win a championship without a dominant center. That has evolved as well over time. But you think about guys like Bill Russell, Will Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Shaquille O'Neal. These guys won lots of rings. Well, Wilt only won
And in
one,
fact,
but-
the center position has evolved so much now that the NBA doesn't even list it on the All-Star ballot
that is true.
because so few guys play the traditional center position anymore. Now there's just you vote
Right,
for 2
right.
front court
So,
guys and 2 back.
I mean, I think
There's 3 front court.
especially I think that position we have to talk about it as like a binary, right? The old center position was all
Back to
basically
back, yeah.
dunks, rebounds, and blocks. That's what you did, right?
Right.
I mean, Bill Russell is the perfect 5.
Right.
Now, you've got small forwards that are routinely, if not 7 feet, close to it.
Yeah.
So when you have that kind of size at a position that used to be dominated by 6'5" guys, the center position has had to change, and now a lot more is expected of them. But you're right in this integral into the defensive concept. They tend to be the guy who patrols the paint,
Right.
waits for the guy to come in there and swats the ball in the 10th row.
Right. Or at least tries to change the shot if they can't block
Yeah.
it.
Right.
Right.
And is responsible for that rebound.
Right.
Right.
Unless
So-
your name is Dwight Howard. Then
Well, then you're responsible for cussing out Mitch Kupchak. That's your job.
So, well, there are a couple things we mentioned. Perimeter players. So those guys play on the perimeter. Wing.
Can you define perimeter?
So the perimeter would be the 3-point line in that area outside of.
I'd say anything outside of 16 feet would be
Yeah.
considered perimeter.
So sort of if you were to draw an arc around the free throw line, right? Sure. If you were to draw a concentric arc centering at the basket around the free throw line, anything
don't-
outside of that is the perimeter.
They don't
Geometry,
play in
bitches.
the paint. We also mentioned the term wing player we have in the past. Wing players we think of are guys that play on the wing, usually small forwards.
I think more often than not, we talk about wing defenders, right? I mean, there certainly are wing players, but I think the term that we usually use is wing defenders, right? You need a guy who can get out there, you know. And a perfect example is to be like an Avery Bradley or even a Paul George, right? Who can get out to the 3-point line and guard effectively.
Like a really good on-the-ball defender.
Defender who's not going to let you run by.
Right. So the reason that they're called the wing comes from where they traditionally play, I guess, on the court, right? So this is another part of the court we haven't defined. So the wing is
The Pegasus part?
sort of say if you take a 45-degree angle out from the basket towards the... Yeah, lots of geometry.
We're doing a lot of drawing on the table, a lot of air movements.
Sort of at this angle, right? So lots of offense will initiate, you'll notice, sort of from an angle, not directly straight out from the center, right?
Right.
And so that's the wing,
Right.
basically, right? So
But certainly within, I mean, from the center of the basket. Certainly from
Are
the
you a
center.
Hawks fan?
Let us pause this while we beat the shit out of Joey for being a Hawks fan. Oh, wait, no.
And
No, it's
elbow
from
drop.
Arrested Development.
Oh, okay.
I'm a chicken.
I'm so excited for that show to come back.
I'm gonna lose my shit for sure.
I thought they were doing a movie. They're not.
They're doing
On
a
Netflix.
full season, and then they're putting a movie.
Might be Undebeatcon 2. Is it
Yeah.
reconvene to watch the movie?
No doubt.
That's very good. I think that'll be Undebeatcon like 5. We're doing this a lot between now and then, I hope.
No, it's coming out like in May.
Oh, okay.
At least
There's a lot of trips
No,
home
the
to
show's
next
first.
month.
the show is like
So we're looking a year from now would be the movie.
maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. Look it up.
Okay, that was a divergent.
Draw a diagram of it.
So a wing player wouldn't play out on top, which would be at the top of the key, the top of the arc,
Right.
directly from the basket. Wing players coming from the sides.
Right. So you can imagine like a point guard comes down and is in the center of the court, and then will pass the ball off to the left or the right, and that's sort of the way the
wing.
play starts, and that's where the wing.
Right, and they sort of a wing defender would generally guard a 2, a shooting guard, or a 3, a small forward,
Right.
out near the 3-point arc.
And have to be versatile enough
Closer
to
to
do
the
both of those
sideline.
things and
Right.
to keep them from the basket.
Right, and to keep them in front and be able to defend a 3-point shot.
Right. Which is not easy. There's also, we've referred to bigs quite a bit.
Sure.
Those are just the big guys. They play usually the power forward position or the center position.
4 or 5 generally.
Yeah.
Front court players.
Tweeners are people that play between positions.
Well, I don't know that.
I disagree with that. I mean, I think for me, a tweener, I think it originally is a scouting term.
Right.
Which is, I think what you see most often when people talk about tweeners would be like between a small forward and a power forward. Not necessarily with the size to play 4.
Yeah.
But without the range to play 3.
Or
right?
the
that
ball
makes-
handling skills.
Or the ball
or-
handling skills, right? So that makes you a tweener, right? You're not quite tall enough to be a 4, but you're not quite guard-like enough to be a 3.
Well, I think a nice way of saying tweener when you're talking about guards is a combo guard. Essentially, is a tweener, right? It's a shooting guard that's too small.
Right, I think that's
and
true,
have
but I
to
think
play
you
a
hear it
point guard.
most often between 3s, 4s.
That's what I'm saying. I'm
as
just
a
saying I think
scouting
they've
term.
come up with the term combo guard just to make it sound.
So, like, sort of
I
the
agree
guy
with
you
this.
brought up earlier, Charles Barkley, would be like sort of. I'm sure that
Very
when he
much
was being scouted, he was
the tweener.
thought of as a tweener, right? Because he's
Right.
not really tall enough.
Well, he would be now. I think back then, I mean, it was okay. I mean, he was short back then, but he wasn't like now. They'd be like, this guy can't play in the NBA, right?
Yeah, right. And what a loss that would be.
Yeah, truly.
He was fantastic.
Just for his analysis.
Yeah.
So those are traditional positions, sort of talking about that. But the game has evolved and made these things murky, as we talked about tweeners, combo guards. Coaches often choose to go small now, fielding a team without a traditional center. It often employs a 3-guard lineup where you're bringing in 3 guards instead of traditional small forward. And then your small forward can act as a stretch 4. When we talk about small ball, those teams are quicker and have more shooters on the floor and have started to revolutionize the game.
That's probably good for the first half.
Yeah, let's bring in some scoop dubs.
Here we go. Hey, yo. One in the hand is worth two in the bush, but it's often not without the drive to push. Hey yo, aim high in everything you do. Try to do what's good and good returns to you. Cause karma's on a cycle, that's the universal truth. Pull up your pants, money, stop acting so uncouth. These days, kids locked in the system. Poverty in public school with no one listening. Running around wild out past the street lights. How many young souls get lost to the night? It sort of feels like that no hope is coming. So with minds stuck, the youth resort to dog running. Not every actor makes it to the big screen. You gotta have more than night hustles and schemes. Turn off the television, put a book in your face. The media's projecting definitions of praise.
So we're back from the break. We want to talk a little bit about some offense, some defense, and some other basic terminologies, which is plurals. Plurals. So first, what do you got? Your basic defense. You've got your zone and your man-to-man are the two basic ones.
Yeah, man-to-man would be the predominant defense in the NBA. Zone was legalized 10 years ago in the NBA.
Yeah, legalize it, man.
Yeah.
You might have seen signs. There's a big campaign.
Right.
It's on the ballot.
It's only used sparingly, usually as a change of pace in the NBA.
Just for the record, Colson and I actually got an argument about what legalizing the zone meant last night.
That's right,
Which may or may not be over, but at its base, man-to-man is the most important thing that you need to know, and that's
You guard your man.
you guard your man.
Wherever he
If he
goes.
runs to the locker room, you follow him,
Right.
and it's your job to make sure that he doesn't score.
It's like the Hoosiers thing.
Yeah.
If that guy, I want to know what flavor gum that guy is.
Exactly.
By the end of the
Exactly.
game, right.
Spearmint, I think, was the answer.
Please,
Wintergreen.
Correct.
And then zone would be where you guard a space on the floor. So you're not guarding your man, you're guarding an area. So if a man comes into that area, you're responsible for guarding him at that point.
Correct.
Very, very true. So, when coaches draw up plays at its base, obviously you've got the five guys on the floor. The point guard would be the guy sort of right in front of the basket near the three-point line. And the other two guys are stacked up, right? 2 and 3, maybe 15 feet from the basket, and then 4 and 5 feet away from the basket.
On the baseline kind of area on either side of the basket.
Right, exactly. So
You see that more in college.
Yeah,
you see it much more in college. You see it much more in college.
And you also see in zone where one player will come over and then the other player will come over and help him. So it's almost...
Right, so that there is complexity to be had, but at its base, you basically are responsible for a fifth of the floor, right? So you draw a circle out 6 feet from you, and you're responsible for that area. If a guy comes in there, make sure he doesn't score. Outside of that, it's someone else's job. The advantages to the zone are a couple things. One, you can always see where the ball is, right? So you can take away passing lanes potentially. Because you can always look at the ball handler as opposed to looking at your man.
And you're always sort of defending. You can have multiple people defending the ball at some level.
Right.
Whereas if you're in man-on-man, sometimes you can be on an island, and if that guy beats you, then it causes a domino effect of everybody else.
They can take everybody off your side of the floor and just put you against LeBron James, right? And it's just you and him.
Right. Yeah. And he's going to beat you.
He's going to beat you a lot.
Right.
With a big stick.
The reason that zone is not used very much in the NBA is that these are the best athletes and most talented players in the world, and there are ways to beat a zone by getting into the heart of the zone. You make that zone collapse, which frees open a lot of people, and there are a lot of good shooters.
And by making it collapse, we mean that
they all suck in towards the ball in the middle. Right.
All 5 of those guys tend to go towards the paint at that point because it's no one's job specifically, it's everyone's job collectively, so everybody just kind of runs at it. And then there's open people on the outside. So what you need to beat the zone are shooters.
Right. And people that are able to beat their men off the dribble and cut into the lane. So there's less of that in the... there's less talent in the college pool. The zone's more effective against...
And the other thing that the NBA does is the rules sort of... While zones are allowed, the rules prohibit sort of traditional zone tactics being used, right? So... the most classic zone is a 2-3 zone, right? So there's 2 guys out top, and then 3 guys down low.
Yeah.
It'll be quick, right? And then the idea is that you put your tallest guy, your rim defender, which is another
camp him
term we
out by the
use,
rim.
and he just hangs out by the rim, and if anybody comes in, he either
Blocks your
fouls them
shot.
or blocks a shot. Right. And so the NBA does not necessarily want that to happen, right? Because they're an entertainment industry.
They want scoring.
They want scoring, they want dunks, they want highlight plays, right? So to prevent that, what they've done is instituted a 3-second rule on defense, right?
Correct.
So you, as a defender, cannot hang out in the lane for more than 3 seconds. If you do, that's a technical foul, right? So as you're watching games, you'll see somebody call defensive 3 seconds or something.
And so
That's
the
what's
way
going on.
that they enforce that in terms of rules is you have to be within, I think, arm's length is
Yes,
what
arm
they
length
use.
of your defender,
Right,
the
so
person you're defending.
You should be able to reach out and touch a guy. Doesn't matter which guy it is, just any guy from the other team. As long as you can do that, then you're legit.
You can camp out in the lane.
You can camp out in the lane all day.
Right.
But barring that, you can't do it.
And sort of reciprocally, the NBA really wants that lane open. So there's also a 3 second violation on the offensive. End, right? So basically,
And there's also a 5-second back to the basket rule. You can't just get the ball, take 18 dribbles, and hang out there, right? So as an offensive player, you basically got 5 seconds to move the back to the rim, and you either need to take a shot or pass.
And those things generate movement.
Those things generate movement. They create excitement.
Right.
The other thing, just real quickly about zone in the NBA, I think that one of the other big reasons that people don't use it is because it hurts you rebounding. By looking away from the basket, you're not looking at the rim, right? And that gives other people a chance to get in front of you and block out. So it does hurt you in a couple different ways. So I think with the athletes that are in the NBA, it's primarily used as a change of pace. Any coach who comes to the NBA and tries to primarily play zone will be fired pretty fast.
And that we've seen that happen.
That's because everybody in the NBA can shoot the ball, pretty much.
Everybody can shoot the ball. I mean,
So
fives can shoot the ball.
Zones, kind of leave people open.
Right.
And
There's tons of soft spot in the zone. If anybody out there watches football, it's the same deal, right? There's going to be soft spots. If you can find it, you will be open.
and there's so much talent that anybody can
Yeah, the athleticism in the NBA is just off the charts.
just pop it out to anybody. I mean, and they shoot the ball and they can make it.
I love NCAA basketball. I do. But I've just never understood the argument that it's just a better game. The
Yeah.
athleticism in the NBA is so ridiculous.
I will go on record to say I do not like NCAA basketball. I like the atmosphere. I love the atmosphere.
Sure.
There's tons of fun stuff, right?
And these kids playing their hearts out, and you got
Yeah.
the crowds going crazy. and-
I love that part of it.
The tournament is a one-and-done tournament. There's a ton of things to love about it.
Right.
There's a lot of things that I don't like about it.
But the level of
It's a
play
slower-
is frankly just not as good. And that's what makes the NBA great. You count out everybody who is not the best of the best, and the NBA is great for that.
So,
Well, now, so in the NBA, you primarily run a man-to-man. There are a couple things that come off of that. You can double team players. There's a press where you're
Press is just short for pressure, right? It just
Right.
means that you bring heat, right? You bring an extra guy, or you make them work
longer to get across the
longer to get across
timeline.
the half court,
Right.
right? Which is called the timeline.
Right. And there's an 8-second rule to get past that half court when you're bringing up the ball.
Which was shortened recently, I think 4 years ago. It used to be 10 seconds, now it's 8.
Now it's 8, and so you can put defenders on that ball handler. It slows, it basically shortens the shot clock for them because if it takes them 8 seconds to get across the half court line, they have less time to set up their offense.
And
So
if
that's
you
a
do it,
press.
I mean, besides being pesky, if you do it well, you can win the ball, right? I mean, you can create a turnover with that press.
So that's one of the few ways that you get off directly man to man, but outside of that, it's pretty much your standard.
So, Colson, as an offensive team, there's really only one play that's truly important.
Right.
I mean, there's tons of different ways to run an offense, but the big one is the pick and roll.
The pick and roll, and the Pacers use it a lot.
As does every team in the league.
Yeah, no, it
It's
is.
sort of the staple of the NBA offense.
I mean, the Spurs butter their bread with the pick and roll, and they're the greatest franchise that I've seen over a 15-year span in many ways, right?
And so the idea here, right, is that you're going to take advantage of the fact that the defense you're playing against is playing man-to-man.
Right.
What you're going to do is the play starts with a pick. And a pick, there's
Or
pseudonyms for this, which is a screen. It's basically a player that does not have the ball obstructs the path of the defender on the ball.
They can't be moving.
Right.
They have to be stationary.
They do have to be stationary.
So you'll see, typically it happens at the top of the key, right? Which we know what this is now.
That's right.
So you'll see the point guard with the ball. Typically a big guy will come and set a screen to the right or the left of the defender that's on the ball.
So the point guard will have the ball, and you just see a big guy just run over there randomly.
Yep.
The reason for that is to knock his guy off the ball.
Exactly. And so then that's the pick part of it. And so the point guard with the ball will move in the direction of the screen. So now his man has been screened from progress. And then lots of things can happen.
Right. He's trying to brush his defender off on his teammate.
Right.
He does, right?
So
So at this point, defensively, you have to make a decision.
Right.
Several different things that you can do. So let's just, for argument's sake, let's say you've got a point guard and a center, right? So you've got your point guard, and he runs across his own man, and that means that the point guard who guards him falls a step behind. So you can either try and go around him near the three-point line and stay on top. It's called going over the screen.
Right.
And try and stick with your man that way. But if he goes directly to the rim, he's going to get a layup. If that same defender decides to go what's called underneath the screen, which is behind that pick, then he has an open jumper, but it's from far away from the basket. The third option there is to switch, and that's let the five. And this is what the Pacers do, right? We call it blitzing the pick and roll.
Well, no. So the switch is different than the blitz. So you can switch completely. The five can start guarding that point guard until you have time to switch back.
Yes, we should definitely make these terms different. So, I mean, if you switch completely, then you have a center on a one,
Right,
and
which is a
eventually you're going to
mismatch.
lose that match.
Right.
That
so
is a
you
mismatch.
try to get that switched back when you can, but
Right.
if
So what the Pacers do to sort of combat that is what's called a blitz, which is basically run out your five and take away space and make maybe that point guard get farther away from the basket, and it gives you time for your point guard to recover. Whether he goes underneath or on top of that screen, it gives him time to get back there, and then you can switch back to your original man-to-man.
So what you'll see is the big man, sort of lunge or move towards the point guard, giving his other point guard time to catch up.
Joe, does this make any sense?
Yeah, I think so.
That was a long way of saying no.
Yeah.
It's difficult to see without visual aids, but essentially what's happening is, and this, we bring up the pick and roll because we think that this is the easiest thing for the casual fan to pick out, sort of in the flow of the game.
It happens early and often.
Yeah, it happens early and often, right? And so basically what's happening is it's a concentrated place where you can create movement and space,
Right.
right?
And potentially mismatches.
And
Right.
potentially mismatches. And I guess we addressed the first part. So the pick has been set, and then the defenders are going to do certain things. They're either going to blitz it, or they're going to go under, or they're going to go
You have to
over, or
react
they're gonna
in some way.
Switch, right?
Right.
And then the next part of the play is sort of what the guy that set the screen does, right? So
Right.
he can now do what's called a roll, right? So the pick and roll is he goes to the basket, towards the basket.
Right.
And now you've created sort of confusion at the point of attack. And so maybe he's wide open and the point guard can deliver a pass and get a layup.
And he makes this decision based upon the defense's choices.
Right.
Right? So if they come up high, if they sort of blitz that pick and roll, or they blitz that pick, then you want to roll, right? Because then your point guard, your one, is still high. And you want to give him a chance to pass you the ball as you roll to the rim, right?
To get a dunk early.
Right. But if let's say that guard tries to go on top of the screen, in that case, that point guard will run to the rim himself, and you want to roll behind him, right? So that gives him an outlet if he gets to the rim and
There's a big dude there.
there's a big dude there. So then you just kick it back to him, and he should have an open jump shot at that point.
The
So-
other term for that, I think, is the pick and pop.
Pick and pop.
We'll call that.
Yeah.
So after you set the screen, instead of going towards the basket, you sort of go to open space, around where you are. Say go 3
Right.
feet directly lateral,
Right.
and then you're wide open.
Take a jumper.
And
The guy can
at
pass
the end
it
of the
on.
day, all offense is predicated upon creating space and making the defense make a choice, right?
To bring this back to Pacers, for the Pacers fan, one of the plays we run most often, we come down the floor, David West sets the pick, George Hill runs off that pick, and then of course all those options we talked about. But what most often happens is that if George Hill doesn't shoot or cut to the basket, West, instead of rolling to the bucket, steps out into space. And George Hill then passes it to him at the elbow, and he then has options because his defender's away from him to
Sure.
make a pass himself.
Sure.
We talk about the point forward,
Sure.
and so that's one of the ways you talk about the pick and roll or the pick and pop, and turns into a high post offense. So it's all hybrid and interesting, but that's where you're going to notice it most as a Pacer fan, I think.
And I refer often to the two-man game, and that's what I'm talking about, right? George Hill and David West have a great two-man game. And that doesn't mean that everyone else is standing around watching for something to happen, but it means that that's where your attention is supposed to be drawn. These other guys can move without the ball and be creative, but everyone they want the defense to be looking at George Hill and David West running a pick and roll.
Because they're both weapons offensively.
Because they're both weapons, right? They can both hit from 20 feet, and that just and
both
also
pass.
David West is a great passer from the high post, right? So even if you make a decision that you want to make David West have the ball up there, he can still hurt you.
Right.
I think at the end of the day, the pick and roll it's kind of the bread. Like most teams, it's a good bread and butter. You create your space.
But what happens at the beginning of the day?
At the beginning of the day,
You're practicing. You're practicing the pick and roll.
Good call.
I'm just buttering bread.
So, I mean, I don't know if this is useful for anybody, but sort of when I was learning how basketball worked, my dad taught me to just follow one guy during a possession, even if that guy doesn't have the ball. Just follow him and watch what he does.
Yeah.
And if you do that for a few possessions in a row, you'll start
pick a
to
different
see
guy.
sort of a method to the madness or whatever.
Yeah.
And you'll see that he'll be involved in different plays and
And the best
Run
was
certain
watching Reggie
screens.
Miller do that.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
he knew the ball was coming to him somehow at some point.
But he's
and
going to do 15 seconds.
But it
of
looks like
screening
bloody
and-
chaos, right?
But it's not. It's
not. It is not only is it orchestrated, but it is precise as hell.
And if you
it's
watch,
Marvin Harrison.
If you watch
precise.
old games with Reggie Miller, they will have a camera on him the whole time, and they're like, "All right, let's watch this because this is beautiful."
Right. Because he comes off 3 different guys to get where he gets to.
Right, and then he's just like wide open, and then he
Right.
draws the foul.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way, like, sort of, if you're interested in getting into the game and how the game is working, like, because I think the casual fan or even me, right, like, the most interesting thing that's happening is at the ball, right? You follow the ball around.
Sure.
But if you can let yourself just follow an individual player around, you can see sort of more things that are happening.
See those
And that's
actions
true
really
on
start
both-
to move, right?
Yeah. And that's true on both the offensive and the defensive end, I
Sure.
think. So.
yeah. I think next we want to talk a little bit about some ways we sort of judge the games after they're over, the box scores.
Pacer win, Pacer loss, is it?
Yeah, get your
That's
W's.
the most important item of it.
It could be an ugly win, but we'll take it.
Yeah, wins a win.
No extra points for pretty.
So if you get on ESPN.com or if you still get the newspaper,
The what?
exactly.
Newspaper.
What's that?
or get the newspaper online, probably more likely. There's a box score. It has points, rebounds, assists, fouls, blocks, steals, turnovers, and minutes for each player, including their field goal percentage and their 3-point field goal percentage and their free throw field.
Not in a newspaper.
I think it has most of those. Right?
No.
But
It's got like 3 stats in the newspaper, I think.
The only things that I thought to point out here, assists are given to the player who passes to someone directly leading to a basket.
Yeah, no, it has to be directly
Right.
leading to a basket.
There's no.
They're
hockey
actually they're fairly rigid about what an assist is in the NBA. In other sports like hockey or soccer, they're fairly loose with that definition. But in basketball, you basically got to pass the guy and like
Who's
no
shooting
dribbles or
or-
odd dribble, and that's it. It's got to go down.
Right. And then their rebounds. There's 2 types of rebounds. There's offensive rebounds and defensive rebounds. those sort of are make sense. At the end of an offensive possession, if your team grabs the rebound, that's an offensive rebound, and you continue your offense.
If the offensive team,
Right, the offensive.
If your team gets your own miss,
Right, that's an offensive rebound. And other rebounds, what's more typical is that the team defending gets the rebound and then starts their own possession.
70% of the time,
Yeah.
the other team gets the rebound.
Offensive rebounds are really damaging because you play defense for 24 seconds or whatever, and then you don't get the ball back.
You either
Yeah.
give up an... Sorry.
I was just going to say we should throw out synonyms while we're doing this too. So we'll often refer to rebounds as boards
Right.
or hitting the glass.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's just another term. For assists, we'll talk about dimes.
Right.
I think is the
We
most
do
common
like calling them dimes.
Yep.
assist term.
Also worth noting, so we haven't mentioned, we sort of in passing mentioned the shot clock, but if the ball hits the rim, no matter what, you get 24 more seconds to make something happen. Mm-hmm. If
Unless
you
the
get
ball
double
gets stuck up there.
well, in that case,
True.
it becomes a jump ball, but
Jump
that's
We're not dealing with
it's
that.
Well, no, we're not, but don't.
I saw 2 last week. Like I've seen 3 in the past 5 years and 2 last week. It was very bizarre. But
And then turnovers. You get turnovers if you travel. Well, you carry the ball. You're not allowed to do that. You have to dribble when you
you do have to dribble when you run around.
you pass the ball to the other team. You pass the ball out of bounds, or if you get an offensive foul, where
Also considered a turnover.
right.
Right.
And then if you're on ESPN, at the end of their box scores, they have what's called a plus minus, and we refer to this quite often on the pod. I think it's Harper's favorite stat, and so I'm going to let you explain that.
Originally, this was a hockey stat, and that's when you're on the floor for whatever minutes you're out there.
What's the net score?
What is your net effect on that game? Right. So if while you're out there, your team scores 8 more points than the other team, then you're a +8 in the plus minus. Conversely, obviously, if they score 8 more than you guys while you're out there, then you're a -8.
And it tends to suggest something about the time you spent on the floor.
It definitely suggests something. It's not a be-all, end-all.
Right, and it's not a direct
Even though it seems like that.
line to a certain player.
Right.
It is
but-
about the 5-man unit on that floor at that time.
Exactly. So, and yeah, it does. You're independent of everybody else, so it's saying your contribution is sort of what it's insinuating. In any one game, it doesn't mean that much, maybe, but over the course of a season, that plus minus becomes a big number.
Sure. If you're negative 450 for the year,
Then you've been
You're
hit.
getting traded.
When you're on the floor, your team is doing.
your team is doing
Your team
poorly.
is doing poorly, right? You in some way you are not contributing enough to make.
And
it.
that's the-
and I mean maybe they just put you out there with a bunch of crappy guys. I mean that is a possibility.
sure.
It can be. So I mean you have to take it with a grain of salt.
It's a piece of information.
but
it's a lot of-
it's an interesting piece of
And that
information.
one, that stat particularly has a lot of context to it.
Tons of context, right? So, I mean, we've talked about how we always leave an extra, a starter out with our bench, right? But that negatively affects generally that starter, and that tends to be David West. So that affects his plus minus in the big
Right.
picture. So even though what he does with the starters is plus 20, if he's negative 10 with the bench because he's the only thing that we got out there, he ends up at plus 10, and that's not quite as impressive. But his contribution is no less important for that. So take it with a grain of salt, but it's an interesting statistical line.
The plus minus is used in what we also have talked a little bit about. We've mentioned in passing is the 5-man rotes. So basically, what we're saying
What is a rote, Colson?
It's a rotation. So five. So
Totes. It's totes and rotation.
so 5-man rotations are a stat used to
Okay, what's a rotation?
Okay, so the 5 players on on the floor at the same time.
What's a player?
5 players on the floor at the same
at 3
time.
in the morning.
I'm a player, baby.
5 players on the floor at
I'm
the
not
same
a player. I just crush a lot.
time. I just crush a lot. Bang.
Clink.
And there are all types of stats you can attach to each 5-person group.
Right.
And that's,
So in simplistic terms, basically, you've got a starting 5. Think of a bench 5.
right.
That's your first rotation, your second rotation.
Right.
Just
But
basic.
if you have, say, you bring in one of those guys, those bench guys, and put it with 4 other starters, and
Right.
that 5-man unit plays better based on some of this plus minus and
Right.
some of these stats.
So that's a different rotation.
Yes,
Well, I mean,
exactly.
the only thing that's important is a rotation implies some degree of.
It's 5 guys on the floor
Of
together.
turning.
Yeah, they're spending some time on the floor together.
Well, but on a regular basis, right? A rotation implies regularity.
Well, I mean, I actually can find you like the
right here,
random.
dude.
I can find you the stats on a weird
does
5-man
not
lineup
even
that
ask
was
for that.
that was run for 5 minutes this season, and I can tell you whether it was successful or not based on 5-man routes.
But that's not a road. That was a 5-man lineup that we played one time.
That was a very.
I took off my hat for that.
Yeah,
one.
you did. For the listeners at home, John just it was so as if it were the end of a fire piss. Right? You got that. But so I
Sorry,
want to
let's
step
move on.
back and just say, so we're spending a lot of time talking about stats and stuff like that, and that an easy question is like, why do we care, right? Like, what do these stats mean? But so, and I think that they're an indicator of sort of how the game went. So if you're looking at, say you didn't get to watch the game, you can look at the box score and almost decipher sometimes how things went.
You can glean what happened, right?
And I think it's informative if you're following the team, right? You can see that you can follow a player from day to day and from week to week and sort of point your attention towards things that might be interesting that the statistics are bearing out that maybe just watching the game wouldn't, sort of point you to.
And I think specifically as Pacer fans, there's a couple stats that are especially important to us, which I think everyone at this table pays very close attention to. One is turnovers. When we limit our turnovers, we win a lot of games. And the other huge one for us is rebounding.
Yeah.
When we're dominant on the glass or the boards,
We tend to win.
And then I would say shooting percentage
Shooting percentage
and opponent's shooting percentage.
Right. I mean, I
Some
almost feel
metric.
like that. I mean, that's a derivative stat, right?
Yeah.
Well, we talk about our dominant defense, and what that means is we're holding the opponent's field goal percentage low. We're forcing well, actually, it doesn't have to do with forcing turnovers necessarily. We don't, but we tip a lot of balls.
I mean, that would be
Indirect.
number of field
our
goals.
high
right?
rebound rate, points per game that we keep the other team to.
And so we call that finishing a possession, right? If you defend well and you get the defensive rebound, we call that finishing a possession, right? We finish that. Like, we didn't give another chance to do it again. And that's one of the most important things in basketball. The other thing that we throw around a lot are sort of advanced metrics or advanced stats. And if anyone is
Sorry.
interested in what this means,
Yeah.
there's plenty of stuff on Google for it.
We're a little too nerdy.
Yeah, no, it's super nerdy stuff, but there's 18 million ways to break down.
That's in Pacers 301.
Yeah.
exactly.
Hence why we like
601.
stats. We're
Yeah,
putting it
right. No, that's- It is geekdom. Behold, in fear.
I think we all have to sing it together. Do we have to?
I thought we were
Yeah,
just
you
getting
do.
drunk together.
No, you have to sing it with me.
No.
No, I think we should.
Turn out the lights.
The party's over. Thank you,
Strike.
Jason. You guys suck.
Wildcat strike.
Boo.
You can find us on Twitter at
Does this make my voice sound cool?
theundebeatables.com. We're on Twitter at Undebeatables, and that's all we do.
We do tons of stuff.
Look for us on the telly. Which is short for television.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is that
We're gonna like explain everything.
is that
about
like that flat square in my living room?
Yeah. That was a burn. That was a rote burn.
it. Rope burn.